I learned a long time ago that life rarely hands you sudden shocks without first whispering little warnings in your ear. The problem is that most of us ignore those whispers because we cling to hope or comfort. We'd rather believe that things are fine, that the people we love would never betray us. My ear, however, has always been attuned to those quiet signals, the subtle changes in tone, the wary glances, the rhetorical questions. I knew something was off long before the final blow came. And when it did come, when they decided to cut me out for Christmas but still demanded I foot the entire bill, I wasn't entirely unprepared. I wish I could say that I was surprised by my family's outrageous request, that my father's dryness, my mother's scorn, my siblings' endless sense of entitlement, and even my spouse's dismissive attitude toward me all came out of left field. But no. The best way to put it is that I had been expecting this betrayal in one form or another since the day I first started to climb out of the pit of poverty I'd been born into. People warned me that success changes you, but they never warned me about how it changes the people around you. It began, innocuously enough, with a group text. It was early December, that time of the year when most families are planning for the holidays, coordinating flights or driving schedules. I was standing in the living room, phone in hand, half watching the gentle snow fall through the window. The text notification lit up my screen. Dad texted, "Hey everyone, Christmas dinner's gonna be at Aunt Helen's place this year. December 24th, 6 sharp. We'll be there a few hours earlier for gift exchange. Let's confirm who's in." I typed back a quick acknowledgement. "Yes, I'm in. Let me know if you want me to bring anything. Nothing suspicious yet." Over the next few days, the group chat pinged again and again with the usual flurry of holiday planning. My sister bragged that her kids had grown out of their old clothes and needed brand new wardrobes for the winter. My brother complained that he had to work extra shifts to make ends meet. My mother wanted to make sure we all understood that she had no intention of cooking the turkey herself. Subtle complaining, standard drama. Then came the sudden pivot. Mom texted, "Speaking of which, Jack, my spouse, told me the other day that you guys got a big windfall. Something about a bonus at work?" She added a winky face emoji, followed by, "So you can help us out with expenses, right?" I didn't think much of it at the time. People get year-end bonuses, sure, but I realized immediately that Mom was dropping the assumption that everything in my financial life was wide open for the family to rummage through. I'd done well for myself over the last few years, founded a small consulting firm, grown it to where I could live comfortably, and I'd certainly share the occasional windfall with them. That was the quiet agreement we seemed to have. I'm the rich one, so I'm responsible for the emergency bailouts, the flight tickets, the dinner checks. However, this time felt different. Jack and I had been distant. We still lived under the same roof, but the tension was palpable. I had suspected him of sneaking around behind my back. There were phone calls he'd walk out of earshot to take, ambiguous texts from business contacts at odd hours. And now, apparently, he told my mother I'd received a big bonus, something I neither confirmed nor denied, but he felt justified to speak on my behalf. A week passed without any direct invitation from Aunt Helen, nor any more specifics. Then, one day, Dad wrote back with an update. Dad texted, "We've decided to keep it to just close family and a couple of friends. The place isn't that big, but we figured, since you're the one with the deeper pockets, you'd help out with the catering costs. Helen's found a nice caterer, but it's pricey. You can afford it, though, right?" No direct, "You're invited," no, "It's good to have you," no, "Bring a dish." Instead, it was couched in that easy assumption. We'll handle the partying. You send the money. I scrolled back up, reread the earlier messages. Not once had they actually said, "You're coming, right?" They'd only referred to me as some sort of ATM. Even so, I convinced myself it was just my own insecurities making me read the text in a negative light. Still, I had a nagging feeling that something was off. So I picked up the phone and called Aunt Helen. She answered after a few rings, sounding bright and cheery as usual. She must have forgotten to hold her tongue. "Oh, hi, dear," she said. "Listen, I heard from your father that you'd be sending a check over for the catering. That's really sweet of you. And sorry we had to keep this one small. You know how limited my space is, but we figured you'd have your own plans anyway." My face froze in confusion. My own plans? I was under the impression I'd be coming. Aunt Helen hesitated. "Oh? That's not what your dad—" She realized, mid-sentence, that she might have said too much. "I mean, we just didn't want to impose, you know. If you're busy, no worries. You'll send the money and skip the fuss." I forced a neutral laugh. Right. It's not a problem, Aunt Helen." She said a few more pleasantries, then hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling a swirl of emotions: hurt, anger, betrayal. They wanted me to pay for the entire Christmas dinner but had no intention of actually having me there. And my own father was the ringleader. A million questions danced through my mind. Why wasn't I invited? Had I done something specifically to offend them? Or was it simply because they no longer thought they needed me, beyond my money? That same night, I found a text from Jack on my phone. It was curiously formal. "We need to talk about us." No greeting, no sign-off. Just that single line. I would be lying if I said my heart didn't pound. In so many ways, my relationship with Jack had felt precarious for months. We drifted. He seemed disinterested in our life together, almost resentful that I was forging ahead with my career. Oddly, though, we never had that confrontation that cracks everything open. No big blow-up, more like an empty, hollow space that kept expanding. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. He couldn't meet my eyes. Then, in a soft but resolute voice, he said, "I've met someone else." I think he expected me to yell or cry or fling the mug of tea I was holding across the room, but I did none of those things. In fact, I don't think my expression changed at all. I just stared at him, letting the words soak in. He cleared his throat, eyes darting away. "We haven't, done anything yet, but I think it's serious, and I need you to understand that I'm leaving. I've been planning on it for a while." There it was. The final blow. He'd all but said he was waiting for the right time, presumably after I had covered my family's holiday expenses so he could slip away with his own finances unscathed, maybe even get a share of any windfall. I realized with a chilling clarity that this was the moment I'd been expecting. The smaller signs clicked together like puzzle pieces, the whispered calls, the bank statements I'd found with unusual charges, the random nights out. He'd let my family in on private details about my money. He'd told them I'd gotten a huge bonus. And now, ironically, they were all looking to me as a piggy bank, while simultaneously shutting me out. "Okay," I said calmly. He blinked as if I'd just responded in a foreign language. "Okay, that's it? That's your reaction? What do you want me to say?" I shrugged. "You're going to do what you want to do. I'm not the type to beg anyone to stay." He laughed nervously. "It's not that I want to hurt you, I held up a hand, cutting him off. "No, Jack, it's exactly that. But that's fine. I already had my suspicions. I'm strangely glad we're just saying it out loud." I rose from the table and walked away, leaving him sitting there. He probably felt more unsettled by my composure than if I'd screamed. And that was precisely the point. Anger, rage, heartbreak. Those would come later. For now, it was enough to watch him realize that I wouldn't crumble. You might wonder how I managed to remain so unshaken. It wasn't because I was numb. Trust me, I felt that twisting sense of betrayal in my gut. But in the months leading up to this, I had quietly done what I was always good at, collecting information and hedging my bets. First, I'd had a suspicion Jack was concealing debts he'd accumulated from ill-advised ventures. One day, I discovered old bank statements in his desk drawer, showing thousands of dollars missing. So, I protected my personal and business accounts. Officially, we had a joint bank account that we used for household bills and groceries, but as soon as the tension started to climb, I created separate ones for my primary earnings. My consulting firm's finances went into a business trust under my name, untouchable by anyone but me, set up by an airtight legal team I'd quietly hired. Second, I had begun paying closer attention to how my family used my money. My father had once guilted me into a massive loan to save the house. The house was never at risk. He just wanted a new car. Instead of confronting him, I documented everything. Dates, amounts, copies of texts in which he promised to pay me back. I had digital receipts for years of loans, holiday checks, everything. Third, and perhaps most crucially, I sought legal advice regarding my relationship. Where I live, common law or spousal entitlements can entangle finances, so I made sure my assets were under my name alone. I made sure that if Jack tried to make a legal claim for half of my firm or half of my house, he'd find that the only item in joint ownership was a modest checking account with just enough in it to keep the bills paid. I guess in the end, you could say I'd been waiting for the moment he'd come out and declare his betrayal. The next day, Jack made a half-hearted apology, telling me he'd move out in the new year after he got his finances in order. I told him, quite matter-of-factly, that he could leave whenever he wished. He looked startled, as though he'd expected me to cling and beg. I think that night, he texted my mother, or maybe my sister, and told them I was in a weird mood. It wasn't until later that I learned how he had continued feeding my family the narrative that I was flush with cash and that they could rely on me to handle Christmas. Little did he know I had no intention of continuing my family's financial illusions, nor any illusions of my own marriage. By mid-December, Dad sent a breezy new group text. "Caterer's deposit is due next week. It's $3,500. You can wire it directly to me. We'll handle the rest." "Thanks." I took a deep breath, my jaw clenching. My father's audacity was staggering. He and the rest of them hadn't even bothered to hide the fact that they only wanted my money. For a moment, I wondered if I should simply send a quiet refusal. But no. If they had decided I wasn't actually invited to join them, I had no reason to comply with their demands. I typed a single message. "I won't be paying for the dinner, as I won't be attending. I hope you enjoy the holiday." I hit send. A minute later, my phone started buzzing. First came the group chat explosions. Mom texted, "What do you mean you won't attend? We need that money to cover everything." Dad texted, "Don't be selfish. You know you're the only one who can afford it." Sister texted, "Wow, so now that you've made it, you can't even help out your family." I didn't respond. I silenced notifications. Then came the individual calls. Mom, Dad, sister, even Aunt Helen. I let them all go to voicemail. Oddly enough, The one person who didn't call was Jack. That evening, my phone pinged with a text from Jack. He was at a friend's place, apparently. Your family says you're stiffing them on Christmas. I told them you got a huge year-end bonus from the consulting firm. Can we at least keep the peace until after the holidays? I rolled my eyes. Keep the peace for whose benefit? Certainly not mine. But I typed back, I have some news to share with them soon. I'll let you know once it's done. He probably read that as a sign of compromise. Maybe thought I'd come around. But the truth was, I was writing something far more definitive. It wasn't just a refusal to pay for a dinner I wasn't even invited to. It was a message that would sever the final ties of exploitation and betrayal. As the days crept closer to Christmas, I could see from the group texts that my family was in a mild panic. They had booked a high-end caterer and had no plan B. They asked each other if they could pool funds, but Dad was short on cash, Mom was busy with her own expenses, Sister had kids to feed, and so on. The entire arrangement was about to fall through if they couldn't get me to cover the cost. In the midst of this drama, Jack began to behave strangely. He was getting testy with me over trivial things, like whether I'd restocked the fridge or paid the electricity bill. I realized he was probably stressed that if I turned off the money faucet, he wouldn't have the free ride he'd been counting on. The person he'd been serious about? Well, I had no idea if she was wealthy or not, but either way, he must have known he couldn't milk me and walk into that relationship with a cushion. One evening, a few days before Christmas, he stormed into the living room, brandishing his phone. Your dad's been calling me, he said with a sneer. He says you owe it to them to pay for Christmas, that they took care of you when you had nothing. I turned from the fireplace, raising an eyebrow. They took care of me because I was their child, Jack. I don't owe them for that, and I won't be guilt-tripped. He exhaled, exasperated. Look, you could just pay it. It's not that big a deal. Then we can get through the holiday without drama. I let out a dry laugh. You really think that's what this is about? Avoiding drama? He nodded. I do. You have the money, so why not help your own family? It was galling how he stood there, arms folded, as if I was the one in the wrong. But in that moment, I remembered all the times I had done exactly that, paid just to avoid drama. And each time, I chipped away at my own dignity. I had to steel myself. Jack, I said calmly, if you're so concerned, maybe you should pay for it. You still have your account, right? He scoffed. You know I don't have that kind of money. Your business is flourishing, so it shouldn't even be a question. I smiled. My business is mine alone, Jack. And you made your choices. So did they. He stared at me, stunned into silence, then stomped away. I had to remind myself not to feel pity for him or for my family. They had grown too comfortable draining me dry. Now they were seeing me stand up for myself for the first time, and it was shaking their world. Behind the scenes, my consulting firm was thriving. I'd just closed a deal with a major client that would carry us comfortably through the next year, possibly into expansions if we strategized well. By the time I walked into my office the next morning, I felt a renewed sense of confidence. My staff gave me small gifts, homemade cookies, holiday cards, tiny decorations, tokens of genuine appreciation. It struck me how different these interactions were from what I received at home. With my team, it was reciprocal, heartfelt. With my family, it was manipulative and hollow. I gathered my managers for a brief meeting. We're heading into a new year, I told them. I want to focus on growth, on forging new partnerships. We're strong now. Let's get stronger. One of them, Gina, raised a hand. What about you? Are you taking any time off for the holidays? I paused. I might. Actually, I'm thinking of traveling. Maybe a spontaneous trip to see an old friend, or to check out a new business opportunity overseas. It was true. I'd been contemplating a trip to Tokyo, where a potential partner had invited me for a casual meeting. Why not? And so, in that moment, I began formulating a plan to spend the holidays away from all the negativity. Instead of trying to wedge myself into a family gathering that didn't even want me there, I could do something exciting, fulfilling, and beneficial for my future. I had the funds, I had the invitation, and I had no reason to stay. That night, I booked a flight. December 24th, direct to Tokyo, returning in January. No time wasted. With my flight confirmed, I decided it was time to send my family one final note. Or more accurately, I posted a single message in the group chat for them all to read at once. I spent an hour drafting, editing, and rereading. This was not a letter of apology or explanation. It was my declaration of independence. I wrote, Dear family. It's come to my attention that this Christmas dinner has become more about what I can pay for than spending time together. Since I've not actually been invited, as Aunt Helen made clear, I see no reason to fund anyone else's celebration. I appreciate the years we spent together, and I've offered my help in the past many times with no questions asked. However, my kindness has been mistaken for obligation. I don't owe you my money or my presence just because you think I can afford it. As for my so-called massive bonus, that is none of your business. I won't be contributing a single cent to a party I'm unwelcome at. Also, I know about the rumors you've spread and the gossip you've engaged in at my expense. If you think that makes me want to help you more, you're sorely mistaken. I'm heading off for the holidays, and I won't be reachable by phone. I wish you all the best. But going forward, let's be clear. I decide how I use my money, not you. Merry Christmas and take care. I read it over once more, then hit send. For a few minutes, the chat was silent. Then came the barrage. Mom texted, "How dare you talk to us like that?" Sister texted, "All we ever did was care for you. This is how you repay us?" Dad texted, "You ungrateful brat. Don't expect us to welcome you back once you come crawling in regret." I watched each message pop up, then turned off my phone. There was nothing left to say. I felt a weight lift from my chest. I was done with letting their opinions dictate my life. They were outraged, yes, but I was finally free. Jack spent the next 2 days in a fury. He'd expected me to crack, to at least give in to some partial payment, anything to keep the peace. When I didn't, he sulked, then tried to sweet-talk me, saying maybe we should patch things up. I saw right through him. He was panicked because he realized his new fling might not be as financially stable as he'd hoped, or that I had cleverly locked down most of my assets. He probably worried that if he divorced me or moved out, he'd walk away with almost nothing. One evening he demanded to see the bank accounts, the very ones he thought were joint. I calmly opened up the joint account and showed him the balance. A modest sum, just enough to cover 2 months' worth of household bills. Certainly not enough to fund a new life or pay for a fancy holiday extravaganza. "What about the business accounts?" he asked, voice tense. I shrugged. "It's all in a trust under my name, separate from me personally. You have no legal claim to that money, Jack. We're not co-owners, remember?" He looked like he'd been slapped. "That's not fair. We've been married for years. I deserve something for standing by you." I couldn't help but laugh. "Standing by me? You're literally leaving me for someone else." He sputtered. We can talk about that later." "No, Jack," I said, feeling a calm rage settle in my stomach. "We won't. Because there is no later. You made your decision." He stormed out, as he often did when he realized he had no argument. Over the following days, I learned that he scrambled to borrow money from friends, and possibly even from my family, to cover some of his personal debts. The irony was thick. He'd boasted so much about how he'd stand on his own 2 feet, but now he was trapped. My father refused to help him beyond a small sum, suspecting that I might eventually cave. When Dad realized I wasn't caving, he had no interest in supporting Jack either. By the time Christmas Eve rolled around, Jack was on the verge of moving out. He had a few boxes packed, though he'd left most of his stuff scattered around, as if he expected to come back. I didn't bother fighting him on it. I just put every document in order, changed all my passwords, made sure I had legal counsel on speed dial. Then I left for the airport. At the airport, I turned my phone back on to check messages one last time before my flight to Tokyo. Predictably, the family group chat was still blowing up with last-minute attempts to guilt-trip me. Aunt Helen had apparently canceled the pricey caterer. They would have to get cheap takeout or cook themselves. Dad was ranting about how I ruined Christmas. My mother's messages grew increasingly unhinged, each one alternating between scolding me for my ingratitude and playing the victim. My sister flung the same tired accusations. "You think you're better than us just because you have money." I scanned through them with a steady heart. Then I typed one final line. "I'm boarding my flight. Merry Christmas." I won't be reading more messages. Then I switched my phone to airplane mode. I could practically hear their exasperation from thousands of miles away, and for once, I found myself smiling at the thought. Not because I wanted them to be miserable, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. Tokyo was a revelation. The city's vibrant lights and bustling energy filled me with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. I met with a few potential partners who were enthralled by the idea of collaborating with my consulting firm. We discussed big plans for the new year, expansions that could see my business operating on a global scale. On Christmas night, I found a quaint restaurant that served a fusion of Japanese dishes with a Western holiday twist. Sitting alone at my table, I raised a glass to new beginnings. No bitterness, just gratitude that I was free from the manipulations back home. When I returned in January, everything had changed. Jack had moved out. His new flame, from what I heard, didn't want to bankroll his lifestyle either. In fact, a mutual acquaintance told me she'd ended their relationship when she realized just how financially unstable he was, and how unscrupulous. He had told her half-truths about me to gain sympathy, but she was smart enough to see through them once she realized he was deep in debt. In the end, he was left with nowhere to turn. My family, meanwhile, had cobbled together a sorry Christmas dinner. Despite all their talk about it being a small space, just close family, they apparently bickered the entire evening over who was to blame for the fiasco. My name was mentioned often, but in hushed or bitter tones, as though they might conjure me by speaking it too loudly. Aunt Helen had insisted everyone pitch in, and when they balked, she nearly canceled the whole thing. So their holiday was overshadowed by tension and cheap replacements for the lavish party they'd imagined. I settled back into my house, enjoying the quiet. Within days, I received a flood of messages from them all, written in softer tones now. My mother wrote, "We missed you at Christmas. We just want to make things right." My sister apologized, at least partially, for the way she demanded money. My father wrote, albeit awkwardly, "I suppose we owe you a thank you for everything you did for us over the years." I didn't respond right away. I needed time to decide if I wanted to mend any bridges or keep my distance. Days later, a letter arrived from my father in which he sounded more honest and reflective. He said he realized that using me like a blank check was wrong, and that he hadn't known how to handle seeing me succeed when he was struggling. He never outright said he was sorry for excluding me from Christmas, but it was implied in every sentence. And Jack? He left a voicemail. His voice cracked with desperation. He said he understood now that he'd made a mistake, that the woman he ran to didn't love him like I had. He asked if we could talk about patching things up. I simply deleted the message. I gave it time. Plenty of time. Eventually, I agreed to meet my family for a casual dinner at a local restaurant, months later, well after the holiday season. When I walked in, I noticed how subdued they were. Nobody had the gall to bring up money. They seemed genuinely contrite, though it would take more than one dinner to heal the wounds or restore trust. I told them calmly that I valued family, but I also valued my self-respect. If they wanted a relationship with me, it had to be built on mutual respect, not financial exploitation. They nodded. Whether they meant it or not, time would tell. The real triumph for me was not in humiliating them, nor in seeing Jack's life unravel. It was in recognizing my own self-worth. For so long, I'd let them define my role as the rich one, the caretaker, the guilt-ridden savior. But I wasn't obligated to be their meal ticket. I had built my success from nothing, and I could enjoy it with people who reciprocated genuine kindness. A few months after that disastrous holiday season, I stood at the window of my new office in a high-rise building downtown. My consulting firm had expanded. The Tokyo partnership had blossomed into a series of lucrative contracts. I gazed at the city skyline, remembering the painful moment Jack had confessed his betrayal, and the day my family tried to exploit me for Christmas dinner. They didn't even want me to attend. It all felt like a lifetime ago. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. Heard about your new office. Congrats. Proud of you, kid. Maybe we can do Christmas together, properly this year. We'll invite you first, promise. I smiled, reading his words. A year ago, they would have stung, chiding me, demanding from me, guilt-tripping me. But now I saw them for what they were. An extended olive branch, maybe an attempt to repair the hurt. Whether I'd accept or decline was a decision I didn't feel rushed to make. One thing was certain. If I did choose to join them for Christmas, they wouldn't be expecting me to pay the bill. Not anymore. In the end, I realized that revenge is best served by living well. I didn't have to rage or punish or retaliate. I just had to walk away from people who treated me poorly and continue building a life of my own design. The look on their faces when they finally grasped how far I'd gone without them was all the poetic justice I needed. So that's how I found my peace. Not through destruction, but through success. And the quiet knowledge that I was no longer under anyone's control. I had taken back my power. And if any of them forget again, I can always point them to that final message I sent on Christmas Eve, the one that reminded them, once and for all, that my life, my money, and my choices are mine alone.